Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Sullivan. I'm the acting director of the Office on Violence Against Women. And all I'm doing today is welcoming you and telling you a little bit about our presenters. Thank you all so much for joining us. Last Wednesday, as you know, on February 6th, we did recognize the International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation. Here at the Office on Violence Against Women, we are working to raise awareness about this violent crime and the danger to girls in our local communities. Now, oftentimes people are surprised to learn that there are, the CDC study, which was in 2012, indicates that there are estimates that there were approximately 513,000 women and girls that are either victims of FGMC or at risk of becoming victims. So this is a domestic issue. We are holding this interactive panel today, expert panel today, because we want to inform you, our grantees, and other interested parties on how to be aware and look out and identify potential FGMC survivors in your work, and then how to respond to the survivors of FGMC. This is an opportunity for all of you to ask questions of our panelists and share what you are seeing in your own work. I am excited for you all to get to hear from our three wonderful expert presenters. The presenters are on the forefront of fighting FGM in the United States. They have firsthand experience in recognizing FGM, assisting survivors, and working to prevent this terrible crime by raising awareness in their own communities. Without further ado, let me introduce our three amazing OVW grantees who are our presenters today. First is Karama, Muslim Lawyers for Human Rights. They're located in Rockville, Maryland. Karama is a nonprofit organization that provides training and technical assistance to organizations on addressing domestic violence in the Muslim community. Karama works to educate people on FGM and to debunk the myth that Islam requires female genital mutilation or cutting. Rama is here, and she will be acting not only as an expert, but also as one of our moderators today. Second, and I feel a special connection to the NISA African Family Services, because they hosted me when I was in Iowa recently, and I was able to spend over an hour talking with Hebo, who's here with us today, and her team, and it was absolutely a wonderful visit, and they helped enlighten me tremendously on what the front line is seeing in dealing with FGMC. NISA provides culturally specific services for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence to African communities in Iowa. In their work, they come face to face with the reality of FGM. And so Hebo is there from NISA, and then lastly is us together from Ohio with Nadia and Ashwak. Us together is a mutual assistance agency of former refugees helping to resettle and provide services to refugee populations in central Ohio. An important part of their work with refugees is providing victim services for victims of FGM and other violence against women crimes. I also want to take a moment to really thank my special friend Rahima. She is at the Global Women's Issues Office at the State Department. She has a very, very busy schedule, as you can imagine, but she will be presenting to you today to talk to you about what's happening globally, and that will come at the very end of our presentation. But Rahima is the acting director of what we call GWI. She's fabulous, she's a friend, and I am so grateful that she found the time to be here today. I finally just want to say something personal, very much from my heart. When I took over this office a little over a year ago and to provide leadership to the Office on Violence Against Women, it came to my attention very early on this issue of FGM and cutting and how prevalent it actually is in our country. And so I have been working over the last year and will continue to work very hard to raise awareness among our legislators here in Congress and to see if possibly we can have some programming added to the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization. So I want to let you all know that this is a true priority for me, and I thank you all so much. I hope you learn a tremendous amount and that this is a very interesting conversation. There is one of our legal team here, one of my counsel. She is going to address you to explain exactly how sort of your work can intersect with FGM. Unfortunately, right now, the Office on Violence Against Women money does not, we cannot directly fund FGMC services, but we certainly can fund it as it intersects with your work. So we're going to have a little talk from our legal counsel and then get right into the substance. I thank you all so much, and please enjoy this next hour.
Good afternoon. My name is Frances Cook, and I'm an attorney advisor here at OVW. And before we get started, I just wanted to briefly say that for those of you who are OVW grantees, that although the Violence Against Women Act funding must be used to serve victims of the 4 VAWA crimes, domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, we hope that this webinar will help you think about and plan for ways to provide appropriate services to survivors of FGMC who are in your community, who come to you for help. And we also hope that it will provide you with ways to think about incorporating these issues related to FGMC into the services that you are providing to victims of the 4 VAWA crimes who are also survivors of FGMC or who might be at risk for it. We also wanted to let you know that if you at any point have any questions about what is permissible with your grant funds, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are more than happy to talk through with you what is feasible as part of your grant award. Please call your program manager. Your program manager can bring in an attorney advisor, and we are more than happy to have that conversation with you. We really want to support you in meeting the needs of survivors and victims in your community. And with that, I don't want to take any more time. Let's turn it over to our experts. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Rama Abdul Ali. I am the Executive Director of Karama Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights. Before we get started on our FGM 101, I just wanted to give a disclaimer that the opinions and findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in my presentation along with the 2 following me are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Justice or the Office on Violence Against Women. What is FGM, FGMC? Our position is that it's unnecessary procedures that in any way partially or completely remove the external female genitalia for non-medical reasons. This mostly is practiced on girls and young women, but I did see someone ask about trans women. Anybody who is being unnecessarily, partially or completely removed of external female genitalia. This is also known as female genital cutting. Some people like that terminology better because they feel that mutilation has a negative connotation. Some people like female circumcision because they are equating it with male circumcision. So we are covering all of this. So when we say FGM, FGMC, we're considering female genital mutilation, female genital cutting, and female circumcision. You will also hear the World Health Organization has identified several different types of FGM, that, oh, it's just a small nick, oh, well, it's complete removal. We consider all types unnecessary. So any cutting, whether it's a nick, any cutting, we consider female genital mutilation. We think that all cutting is wrong and that this is a violation of human rights. On your screen, you'll see that there are multiple health outcomes from FGM. The immediate one is just the shock that happens to the women and girls when they realize what's happening to them. We want to really point out possible deaths. You should keep in mind that this is not being held usually at any kind of medical environment, nobody with medical training. So it is possible for things to go wrong. So it has led to death. Gynecological complications, so urinary and vaginal issues, mental health disorders, which I'm sure you guys can all completely understand, the anxiety that comes and the depression that comes, and definitely PTSD after this occurs. Sexual dysfunction, us together and NISA African Women's Services will really talk about the issues that come up after FGM. And so they really talk with people, you know, on the ground, what's happening, and they can really give you some more examples. And then this is coming up a lot when people don't realize what's going on, when doctors have no idea, medical professionals are like, what happened to her? And they don't really know how to respond to people who are survivors of FGM. Why does this occur? It occurs for a number of different reasons. There are a lot of, well, it's our culture, it's a rite of passage. If you have it, you know, you're pure or clean. It goes back to some religious justification that we have all heard that, you know, like it probably goes back to Adam and Eve. Like for some reason, women have this hypersexuality that needs to be curbed, and it can be curbed through FGM. And also when that particular line of reasoning is not working, then they always come with, oh, it's hygienic and it's a cleaner way to live by having FGM. These are some common myths that we often hear from people who are very supportive of FGM. So we hear like, oh, if you get, you know, if you get the small little rites of passage, it will prevent urinary tract infections. Oh, it removes bad bacteria around the clitoris. Oh, it prevents, this third one is actually a new one that's coming up a lot in religious justifications that, oh, for your significant other who is performing oral sex on you, you are helping prevent them from getting HPV virus transmitted to them and getting oral cancer. So you are helping someone else avoid oral cancer by being mutilated. And then it's like, oh, you know, as you get older, everything starts loosening up. So the other myth is that if you have FGM, you'll have tightening skin around the clitoris, and it means that your sex life will be so much better if you have FGM. So these are the myths that we often hear out in the, you know, front lines about what was told to them about why FGM was needed. I think that a lot of people, and I really thank Acting Director Katie Sullivan for really bringing focus to this, when she, even in her opening remarks. People, for some reason, think that this is a international issue. It doesn't happen in the U.S. Why do we care? And I'm so glad that she mentioned it, because the fact that it happens here in the U.S., and it's something that we should care about, the fact that over 500,000 girls and women are at risk or have experienced FGM right here in the United States is a huge issue, especially in light of the fact that the U.S. has had a federal law for over 20 years banning the practice. So the fact that we still have 500,000 girls at risk should really cause everyone to sit up and be like, wait a second, why are people still at risk if it's illegal? And then also 26 states that, on top of the federal law, 26 states have banned FGM. And it's not something that you can say, oh, only this immigrant group from this country does it, or that's not my culture. It goes across cultural, socioeconomic, religious groups. I'm here in the DC metro area, and there are 50,000 girls at risk for FGM just here in the DC area. It is really important to think that there's 500,000 women and girls who are at risk here or who have suffered from FGM, but there are nearly 200 million girls around the world that have suffered from this. This is the removal of healthy sexual organs for no reason. It really is violating the woman's body for no reason. And it threatens the lives of girls and women and violates their human rights to life, liberty, and security of their bodies. So it's really important for everyone to understand this is, I'm just setting up kind of the framework of what you're dealing with, is that FGM is not something that is, oh, that's just international and it doesn't really affect us here in the U.S. and, oh, I'm going to go help somebody over in another part of the world. No, there are women and girls here in the U.S. that need help with this issue. I'm now going to turn it over to us together to give you like the real on the ground what's happening here in the U.S. So please go ahead, us women and girls, us together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Nadia Kasvin, co-founder director of Us Together. Us Together was founded in 2003 by former refugees, and we're currently a statewide organization with offices in Columbus, Cleveland, and Toledo, with more than 30 different programs providing integration services to refugees and immigrants. So on the current slide, we see all the programs that we provide. And as we started our first resettlement program, we started working very closely to our new refugees that were coming from various African countries, specifically from Somalia. And through 2003 to 2005, we experienced also a significant secondary migration of Somali population to Columbus area. We currently have second biggest Somali population outside of Africa, with anywhere between 50 to 75,000 Somali refugees and former refugees residing in Central Ohio area. And so as we started working with refugees from Africa, we encountered the problem of FGMC and did a lot of learning about this issue. We conducted a lot of community outreach and education, especially as we were referring our newly arrived refugees to medical providers. We realized that our medical providers were absolutely not prepared to deal with this issue and address these issues with their patients. As a result of our outreach, Somali women leaders emerged in the community, and they themselves did a lot of education of service providers at that time, and even started Somalian Women Children Alliance. 10 years later, in 2013, as our organization started providing more in-depth services and working with survivors of torture, survivors of gender-based violence, and sexual assault, as we started providing the services through various programs and funding sources, we realized that this issue is still very much alive in communities that we serve. And we really need to continue doing the work of educating community and service providers. And so I want to pass now to and introduce Ashwak Noor, our case manager, who does a lot of work working directly with our communities. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ashwak Noor. I was born in Somalia, but came here as a child. I graduated from Ohio State with a BA in International Studies. I have been working for this agency for 2 years now. In June 2017, I started working as gender-based violence case manager, and my main focus is on African women. I have been working on this program for 15 months. The clients I worked with are from Burundi, Congo, Eritrea, and Somalia. During my outreach and working with the clients, I learned a lot from the communities I engaged. It was heartbreaking listening to their stories of trauma. The more I worked with survivors of gender-based violence, the more I was able to provide the resource and access to the service most important to them. It was important to my clients that I'm Somali, since it helped overcome language and cultural barriers. It took months for some clients to open up and trust me. Some clients agreed to share their stories, but the fear was still there once they realized they had to sign forms, and many declined in fear of their children facing backlash or worse. Many of the clients have PTSD, so it was important to be patient and to listen and provide research to build connections. I wanted them to know they were safe with me. During one of my outreach visits, a man shared his disapproval and told me not to get involved in my work and that I was too Americanized to understand the culture reasons behind the practice of FGM. This encounter did stress me out and make me feel unsafe, but it also pushed me to learn more in order to better serve my clients. I made sure my clients knew their information was confidential. Because of the stigma, it was hard at times to enroll clients. So I reached out to my old patients from a pharmacy I used to work at. I had to show the clients their stories were safe with me, and I had services for them. I want to share a heartbreaking story that affected me deeply. This client is 38 years old and faced a lot of hardships. Her first experience of FGM was at age 7 years old, and then later as a teenager. The type of FGM she had, it's called Gudnin Fir'auni in Somali, which means she had her clitoris removed. This is known as type 2 FGM. She is the oldest among her siblings and started working as a maid. While working, she was raped by her boss. She told her mother, who immediately took her to a small town where no one knew her and forced her to undergo type 3 FGM, where they sealed her vaginal opening. Her mother said if she doesn't do this, she will be shamed and no one will marry her. The client had a child in 2009 in Columbus, Ohio, where she was in labor for 36 hours, and the doctors didn't know how to properly help her. They were not prepared to support an FGM survivor giving a birth. After the labor, she had to get surgery right away. The doctors told her she can't have normal labor for the next 6 years. It will be too dangerous for her health. The client said if she had the opportunity to sue the person who did it, she would. That's the experience I wanted to share as a case manager. I will now turn it over to Nisa. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hiba Jama, and I am with NISA African Family Service. And we are one of the cultural specific programs in the state of Iowa that's working with victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, human trafficking, and stalking. We have been doing this work since 2011. In 2015, we got a 501c and we became a separate organization. So our work, as we were doing in domestic violence, sexual assault, we have encountered women who have gone through female genital cutting. And we provide a support group a monthly and weekly support group every Friday. They meet in our office and they learn how to sew, and during that time they interact and talk about what is female genital cutting. So when we talk about female genital cutting and FGM, so the naming, what is female genital cutting or female genital mutilation? The perspective of female genital, like the victims of female genital cutting, feel that it's safe to call it FGC instead of calling female genital cutting, because they feel like it's female genital mutilation, because they feel like they are disgraded, they are looked down into, are demeaning, so they feel like inferior, more inferior than the other women. So it's more safe to call FGC than to call FGM if you're working with a victim who underwent FGC. And FGC is either partial or total removal of the clitoris, and it has a cultural and traditional roots. It's been passed from generation to generation. It's been inherited. It's a tradition that has been inherited. And when we talk about it, sometimes we have to be conscious of when we are talking to people, victims of female genital cutting, because when we approach it boldly and we say, hey, you need to stop female genital cutting, they will be like, this is my tradition, this is what I practice. So how do you approach it? It's mainly practiced in Africa, many parts of other parts like Middle East, Asia, they practice. So what does the community see as when you talk about FGC? They feel like it's a part of purification, cleansing, ensuring marriageability, improving fertility. It has social pressure where to conform. It's a cultural and tradition. And when does this female genital cutting happen? Mostly it happens between the age of 5 and 10 years old to a child. And most of African immigrants and refugee communities or other parts of the African, those people who practice, mostly it's a global issue. But before they come to United States, once they're given the status, what they do, they rush into doing the practice before they went to the country that accepted them to give refugee. So you will see like a 3-month-old they're doing to her, and at a younger age. So technically before they get to United States, some of them have already underwent the FGC. What are the so the views of the survivors, as we continue working with them, what we have discovered was at the beginning of the conversation, it was so hard for them to even accept that female genital cutting was not allowed, you can't practice. So it was so hard because some of them were like, this is my culture, you can't interfere with it. But as conversation continued a couple of times, and seeing the picture from the health risk and those issues, they were able to perceive it nicely and accepting it and say, hey, okay, I understand what you guys are talking about. We recently talked to one of the imams in Iowa, and we told him, we were discussing about FGC, and he was like, it needs to be criminalized. And I was like, do you know the risk that you're going to be putting on the community? He was like, no. After we talked to him, he was like, okay, so education, we encourage education before the criminalization. So we met with the survivors who went under female genital cutting, we met with the youth who went under female genital cutting, and also we went with those who are at risk to go through female genital cutting, and those will be the little girls who were born in the United States. And this was the perspective. It was like it has culture and it's been passed on. And we don't want our mothers to go to jail just because they did what they were brought up doing. And what I went through was horrible, and I don't want my siblings to go through the same thing. And we also would like to share also, and we had, in 2018, we had a survivor who was contacted and was referred to us, and she was newly married, and she came to United States. she was never able to have intimacy with her husband because she went through female genital cutting. So there is a different degree of it. So the third degree in fibrillation is the most, like the opening is narrowly, like, there's, so some of them, they go to the healthcare and have the correctional done. So this woman was married for 2-3 months. She wasn't able, but her husband helped her get, and so they were referred to us. So the couple came to us and they were like, we want somebody, a doctor, to do this. We had to jump from, like, all this through all these OBGYNs and see who will do it. We couldn't find any. Until last minute, one of the doctors who have a strong relationship with our organization was able to contact another doctor who practiced in Cedar Rapids. And we had to take that survivor there, so she has to go through that reconstruction. So technically, the medical providers in the United States are not well prepared to receive and attend to the victims of female genital cutting. Effective solution. So in our state, as we speak right now, we have bills in the House where they want to criminalize female genital cutting. And what we have been doing is, like, we have been having dialogues where we want to say, like, before you criminalize, first educate. Do a lot of education, do a lot of outreach. Give the communities tools, and and approach this through health issues. That way, it will be conceived in a much better way than just saying, hey, we're going to criminalize an act that you have been doing, because sometimes we associate this practice with celebration of Thanksgiving, how Americans have that traditional, like, we celebrate, we value Thanksgiving. So this community also value FGC the same way. They celebrate when that is done. A group of girls, they celebrate, they feast, they do so many things. So it's like, we need to approach in a way that is more, giving them more tools. So outreach and education, and educating and the healthcare providers, pediatric doctors, and immigration communities, and then also not to instill fear, but rather, the best way to achieve lasting changes toward FGC is through grassroots community organizing and education. Disclaimer, this project was supported by Grant 2017 KSAX 0010, awarded by the Office of Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinion, finding, conclusion, and recommendation expressed in this publication program exhibition are those of the author and not necessarily reflective of the view of the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. For more information, we have our website there. You can contact us at NISA-AFS.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, NISA African with Family Services and Us Together. That was excellent information. We know it's a quick overview because they could have each given you an hour worth of information. We're going to open it up for questions now. I have some preliminary questions to get it started, but if anyone in the audience who wants to participate, you can write your questions in the chat box and I will read them to the presenters to get their feedback. But I wanted to start with Us Together. When you were talking, you discussed that there needs to be unbiased and open dialogue with survivors. Could you give us some examples of what you would consider unbiased and open dialogue? Because I know, me personally, I would feel like, what do I need to do to help you? But that might not be the best way to approach a survivor. So if you could tell us some examples, that would be great.
I meant to say what I mean directly was my client felt comfortable working with me because, first, yes, I'm Somali, that didn't experience this trauma, but at the same time, I was there to help them when it comes about standing up for them, most of the ladies that I work were single mothers who didn't had any male figure in the house who can support them. They didn't even know, they can't even sign their names. I connect them with OBGYN. So I felt that even though I work with Burundi and Congo and Eritrea, just because I knew the language, it was easy for me to get more Somali clients enrolled in than any other community members.
Okay. Hibo, you mentioned on your slide about the idea that FGC improves fertility. Could you give us more explanation about that?
Yeah, that is the perception that the community have when they do female genetical cutting. They say it enhances, it enhances fertility, but that is the opposite. So those are the things that we can include in the myth, where they say, because they want the girl to go through. So, yeah.
Okay. And I also know that you have worked with some survivors in peer support groups. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the peer support group is, they meet every Friday. They come to the office. They learn how to sew, and that is like an interactive time to meet and talk about female genetical cutting. So, and that was a break for us to even start talking about these issues, because sexual assault, domestic violence in African community and refugee community mainly, they see this as a family issue. So it's like, they already have that shield that you can't penetrate and you can't talk about it. So this is a way where we bring the victims in a space in a non-threatening way, so they learn how to sew. So we show, we have a discussion clip, we have them get involved, and they talk about how this was happening in Somalia way back. Sometimes some of them will say, oh, in Sudan, how it happened, how it was happening in Burundi, Rwanda, Congo, and also when we're talking about female genetical cutting, it's not just cutting itself. There's also a community that does female and sexual enhancing, where it's they call it pulling. So communities from Uganda, some of the Rwanda and Congo, they practice that. So technically, instead of cutting the clitoris, they will be pulling it, so they will enhance. And we feel that is also because a lot of community will say after they come from that pulling, and they will be they will want to have sex. So the community see us, because when they practice female genetical cutting, it's kind of controlling the sexuality of a girl, so they can't have sex before marriage.
Okay.
I
see. I see in the chat box that we have a couple of questions. I think that this question could probably be answered by either us together or NISA African Family Services. Do you find women are as resistant to ending the practice as males simply due to her historical tradition?
Yes. Right now, even the Somali men are joining to stop this this cultural behavior that was happening for a long time. We have women who are going to go under the FGM to get surgery again, since I believe Hibo already mentioned this. Yes, we, especially the Somali community, they're trying to stop this cultural thing that's been happening for centuries.
Okay. Someone asked.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to ask.
No, go ahead, Hibo. Go ahead, Hibo.
Some men are also right now, they're looking for girls who never went through female genetical cutting. And that, I think, is also a positive way where, that will prevent mothers from doing it. So they're not marrying the girls who went through female genetical cutting, and they're looking for the girls who have not been cut. So I think that's a positive way to stop it.
Oh, wow. I never thought of actually the reverse of what you would think, that some now all of a sudden it's not attractive for marriage prospects that have FGC. I see a couple of questions from, I want to say Los Angeles. And one of the questions is, do you find that survivors and or families are more receptive to education that comes from people who share the same background or identity? And I think us together kind of address that with how she has been able to connect with the Somali population. But if you can give us a little bit more about that.
I can answer that. And yeah, the community will feel, because most of the African immigrants and refugee communities, they have that language problem. They have the language barrier. So they will more connect easily with the people that look like them or who can speak their language. So, and then they will open up. And also they have that fear because they are in a new country, they don't understand the system, they don't know where this information will be taken. So sometimes they are reserved in talking to people who are outside their communities.
It's Nadia, cousin. I also want to add here that in addition to support groups that we conducted with victims of crimes, we conducted series of focus groups in a community. And in addition to women coming to our focus group sharing their experiences, we also asked them to share their thoughts on what would be the best way to address this issue in the community. And I think that was very important for developing our programming and for developing our approaches, so that we did not just rely on our experiences or experiences of our staff. We asked community, and there's always very important, and we try to do it for all of our programs, to get the input on community and the best approaches.
Thank you. I see a question from Michelle, which she says she thinks might be too legal, but whether an American doctor is permitted to perform these procedures on minor patients. I had heard that these were efforts to prosecute people to perform these procedures on minor patients. There were efforts to stop this in Missouri. Yes. Well, that goes to my initial slide, really, about it being a federal law and then 26 states having laws. It is still considered illegal to do FGM. So even a doctor can't say this is a medical procedure unless they're doing this procedure for a medical reason. When we talk about FGM, we're talking about any cutting that is for a non-medical reason. So if there's a medical reason for the cutting, that's not FGM. But if there's no medical reason for the cutting, we consider that FGM. I see a question from Tanya that now that FGM is on the radar and is seen as a practice that to end, is there stigma? Are we stigmatizing people who have been victimized by FGM? And is there a growing sense of bias against those who have experienced it? So either us together or Lisa, Akron Family Services.
And I have another advocate from NISA, Barwako Aden, who would like to answer that question.
Thank you. FGC it's a very sensitive matter, but when it comes to bias, starts with the name FGM, female genital mutilation, is a very that's where it starts from. And then when we are talking to making the dialogues between the legislators and other people, like how other people talk about FGM and FGC and not the communities that it happens, that sells a bias, because you tokenize and take everything and traditional and culture that this community had and you put in a paper and say, we need to stop this and this has to. That is a way that diminish and put some of us like who are fighting for this and who are also victims of the female genital cutting and who came from the community that practice 100%, put us in a level that that hits us back, that this needs to stop, and we all want this to stop, but it happens, and why are you advocating for not to criminalize, for not to do all those things without doing the outreach and education that we do with our support group, with our young people, that who, when we talk to them, said we don't want this to happen to our communities, we don't want this to happen, and also we don't want to put our parents into jail.
Thank you very much for that. I see another question we offer cultural specific services in Michigan. How can we support this issue here? Where can we start in Michigan? So how can they start in their location?
So we started with, hello, this is us together. We started with the school system and talking with school nurses and practitioners in the medical field as well, just to begin the dialogue, because so many people in America are just unfamiliar with this practice.
Okay. Kibo, do you have something else to contribute?
No, I'm good. It's been
okay. Another thing that's come up as I'm listening to you guys talk is how can we educate healthcare providers? Because it appears that that's a time when a lot of people finally are made aware of this issue, is when they have some health issue. So what is the best way to really educate medical providers? So if us together can start and then Hibo can finish?
Yeah, so we've been very actually successful in reaching to our medical community. We partnered with one of our biggest medical systems, Ohio State University Medical Center, and they medical providers, definitely nurses, social workers, they have to fulfill certain continuous education obligations. And so we worked with their education department, continued education department, and we offered certain programming for them, which then we were able to work together with medical center to package it in a way that we provide them information, but they also benefit from their continued education. That's been very successful, and we usually do 2 to 3 presentations a year, which are very well attended. They also record them and offer it to all their medical providers to listen to on their own as continued education, to get their continued education unit. And recently we've been approached also by medical systems to do similar training for doctors, and we are very excited about this opportunity. We would see several doctors here and there during our presentations, but doctors notoriously very difficult to get into continued education classes. So now we're actually working with medical facilities to do specific training just for doctors, and we are talking about medical implications to victims of sexual assault and FGMC. So that it's really something that they benefit from information and understanding about.
Thank you so much for that. I see some questions. Can FGM be potentially fatal? The yes or no answer to that is yes, it can be potentially fatal, really based on the fact that it's very rarely done by medical professionals. So you can imagine any type of surgery that's being done without a medical professional. There's no license, there's no liability insurance. Anything can be potentially fatal. So yes, FGM or FGMC can be potentially fatal. There also was a question about, has FGM been reported in Native American communities? I really would not ever consider myself an expert on Native American communities. I'm not sure if Us Together or Lisa African Family Services have actually ever been, have either of you guys actually addressed that issue?
No, not for Us Together.
Not for Lisa too. But I wanted to add something to the education or to the medical, and we wanted, like, if it's possible, if a curriculum will be added to the medical schools where doctors are already or nurses are prepared on how to deal with female genital carrying victims, because right now a lot of FGC victims are in United States. The other thing also we advocate for is also providing a healthcare benefit for the survivors of FGC. That will be also something, because women mostly, unless you're pregnant or something, you don't get health insurance. So if complication related to female genital carrying is developed, a woman will not be able to go to the doctor just because she doesn't have insurance. So having insurance for her and be prepared. The doctors and the nurses are prepared on receiving this new population in the country will be also an added advantage.
That's actually a great point.
I'm sorry. I also want to add that I agree with Hibo that most of the clients, they complain. For example, most of the Somali women that I run into it, almost all of them went through C-section. And they were like, back home, the doctors understood exactly what's happening. So like most of them won't even go to the doctor, like even like last minute when the water break, they will go last minute. They won't go right away because they're afraid to get C-section. Because like also, and nobody knows how to handle us here. It's not our fault, and I wish they knew how to. The doctors have more experience about how to handle this the FGM survivors. So I agree with Hibo that it will be grateful for doctors to know exactly how to handle, because next 10, 20 years we still have women who went through FGM who are in, whether they're in the States or in Canada.
I thank both of you. I think that that's an excellent idea of educating doctors, because that is basically the front lines of really helping women once they have survivors. Because most of the time we're not just trying to stop it from happening to other people, but we want to be supportive of survivors and what they've gone through. So really educating doctors so that you're not embarrassed when you go to the doctor and they're not saying, what in the world happened to you? They know how to appropriately discuss with you what has happened to you. I see a few other questions. I saw a question that touched on politics that we're really not going to touch on here for this webinar. Acting Director Katie Sullivan already mentioned that she really wants to add FGM to VAWA, so that's going to be where we stop for the political discussion. And then research identifying this, have you heard of any in the African American faith-based community? I have not directly heard of any, but I will tell you that you would be surprised where it is actually FGM is being practiced. So I think some people say, oh, well, they're African Americans and, they've been in this country for centuries and they don't have any issue. You'd be surprised. I was shocked when I was told about a community in West Virginia, Christian community in West Virginia, who has been practicing this for centuries. And I'm like, West Virginia? I was like, there's no, because in my mind, initially I went to, oh, they must be refugees or something. They were like, no, people in West Virginia have been practicing this as part of their Christian community for centuries. And so it is one of those things that it's not really talked about, and it is not until survivors start getting together in support groups that we really kind of hear about what's going on. I actually now want to turn it over, because I thank everybody for being interactive, and that's why we said on this last slide that if anyone has more questions, feel free to email me, email us together, visit NISA Acton Family Services on their website, contact the Department of Justice for OVW grantees. You can contact your grant manager. If you're not an OVW grantee, you can contact Emma. She has left her information there. I now want to turn it over to Acting Director of the Department of State's Office of Global Women Issues, Rahima, who wants to give us a little bit of overview from the global perspective.
Thank you, Rama. I appreciate it. This has been an extraordinary conversation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Katie, for your leadership in organizing this very important discussion today. My name is Rahima Kandahari. I'm the Acting Director of Office of Global Women Issues in the Secretary's Office. We are directly reporting to the Secretary of State at the U.S. Department of State. My office leads the State Department's effort to advance the rights of women and girls in the U.S. diplomacy, partnership, and programs. As part of our work to advance human rights and empower women and girls, the U.S. Department of State is committed to ending FGMC and addressing its consequences for survivors. My office's efforts focus on raising awareness about its prevalence, addressing the social norms that drives this practice, and promoting legal and policy frameworks criminalizing this form of violence through programs, reporting, and our diplomatic engagements across the globe. I'm pleased to participate in this discussion just 1 week after commemorating the International Day of Zero Tolerance Day. As we all know, that was last week, February 6th. And as you all know, that the State Department usually recognize this day, and we did issue a statement and noting that ending this practice requires a survivor-led response and leadership from policymakers, health practitioners, and faith-based organizations and communities, which is incredibly important that for the faith-based communities to participate and end this kind of engagement in the future. And we know that the work of local and community-based organization is a key. We cannot understate our appreciation for the role of religious leaders, trusted figures, and those engaged and in touch with your communities. Your work is critical to ensuring the survivors have access to the resources that they need, that the solution to ending FGMC are identified and implemented at the local level so they can be successful and enduring. Sustaining that effort is incredibly important because it should not be a one-off effort. The use of strategy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence globally recognizes FGMC as a form of gender-based violence. The strategy makes clear that FGMC is a harmful practice that requires multi-sector response, one that includes community-led responses, a change in social norm, and a political commitment. We do recognize that the change in social norms will be very difficult to overcome. We implement this strategy at the Department of State through programming targeted at ending FGMC, including in 7 countries in Africa and, of course, 1 country in South Central Asia. We also utilize the Voices Against Violence program and an emergency response mechanism that can provide rapid response and assistance to those facing the threat of FGMC. And in 2018, the Department of State contributed more than $5 million to help end this heinous practice. We are proud to work in partnership with agencies across the U.S. government, including our colleagues at the Department of Justice, to speak with one voice as the U.S. government and our commitment to ending the practice of FGMC. The message is very simple for all of us. We all know this. No girl should have to endure the detrimental effect of FGMC. No girl should be deprived of her dignity and self-worth. And the girls deserve the right to live up to their greatest potential. And I do thank you for this vibrant discussion. We learned a lot from this discussion today, and I would like to turn to Katie. Thank you so much, Katie, and please never think that we don't have time for this kind of discussion. We are always here to stand by you and support your efforts in this space. Katie?
Thank you so much. Thank you, my friend Rahima. And thank you so much, Rama, Thibault, Nadia, and Ashwak. But I also especially want to thank all the people who joined us on this webinar. This is such an important topic. Your questions were thoughtful. It is very helpful to me sitting here and looking at the questions, the kind of information that you all are looking for, so that it helps inform me on next steps. I do want to address one thing that came up repeatedly, and that is how do we get to some of our healthcare providers. And I want to let you know that I've had multiple meetings with Health and Human Services looking at particularly HRSA, who provides a tremendous amount of funding for the federally funded clinics around the country, and talking to them about how they can use some of their funds to implement some training for, PAs, nurses, doctors on the signs of FGM, and then even more important, as I think it was Rama brought up, how then do they actually approach that individual and help that survivor. So I just want to tell you all, thank you so much. This is just the tip of the conversation. I thank my friends at State again, and we look forward to continuing this important conversation on this issue. Thank you all, and I think we're going to sign off now. Thank you so much.